Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. It's a podcast where we meet you in your pain and provide a pathway through. You know, we say that a lot, and you've probably, if you've been around Nothing is Wasted Ministries for some time, you've heard us talk about meeting in your pain and providing a pathway through. And that's intentional because there's two parts to this whole journey. One is being able to be aware and recognize, validate the pain that you're experiencing. And as you're walking with other people, validating the pain that they're experiencing, knowing how to show up with the ministry of presence, knowing that you don't have to be perfect in helping others navigate pain. You just have to be present. I'm telling you, when I walked through the tragedy with my late wife, Amanda, and our unborn baby, Evie, I don't remember what people said to me, other than the fact that there were a lot of people that said some very well-intentioned things. I'll give them that, but they were not helpful. Things like, at least you're young and you'll find love again, or at least she's in a better place. I mean, all of these, by the way, if you ever start trying to comfort somebody with the phrase, at least, just stop. It's not going to be helpful. And so people would say certain things to me, and it wasn't very comforting. It wasn't very helpful. But I do remember distinctly the people who were there for me, who showed up, who stuck around for me when everybody else's life began to go back to quote unquote normal. And here I was still sitting in the shattered pieces of my new normal, people who were walking with me. And so meeting you in your pain is a really important thing, because you need to know your pain matters. Your pain matters to God. Your pain matters to us. And the second part of this, providing you a pathway through. You need to know there is a pathway through your pain, that you don't have to stay stuck in it, that this does not have to define you, that you don't have to wallow in this. This is not something that has thwarted the purposes of God in your life. In fact, God has redemptive purposes in your life, and we want to invite you to partner with God to take back your story, to move through this valley, to walk on purpose and walk on mission. And that's why here at Nothing is Wasted Ministries, we provide resources, content, community, coaching that helps you with that meets you in your pain and provides you a pathway through that pain. You know, a lot of people in their pain pathway are asking the question, how do I help my kids when it comes to pain, trauma, grief, loss, especially the circles that Christy and I run in quite a bit with widows and widowers because of my time of being a widower. People are looking, especially moms and dads, you know, are in those situations. They're looking for ways to support their kids. How do I know if my kid's behavior is normal? Is this a trauma response? Is this a behavioral response? And that's why I'm so glad that we have this conversation today with Erin Nelson and Colleen Montague, because Erin's story is unbelievable. And then their partnership together in providing a space called the Jessica's House, to support grieving families is just unbelievable. Talk about going from pain to purpose. Erin Nelson is an advanced trauma practitioner, and her world came crashing down after her husband was killed in a plane crash. And she founded the Jessica's House, just seeing that there was a deficiency in her own ability to support her kids and her family with this, and then noticing that in other people as well. And so this was a purpose-born mission, or a pain, I guess you could say, catalyzed mission. And then the unthinkable and unimaginable happened even after that. While she's in the middle of her purpose work, she lost a child, lost her son in a car accident. And so Erin knows well the pathway of grief. She has traversed it. And I am so encouraged by hearing from her. You're going to see, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to hear from her a hope that's just like this resonant hope in how she talks about this, that only can come from the Lord, and only can come from the ministry of presence, both from the presence of the Holy Spirit and other people that gathered around her. And so we have a conversation with Erin. We also brought on Colleen Montague, who is a licensed counselor, who is the executive director of Jessica's House. So they together have partnered in creating this unbelievable space that helps to support families and kids in the middle of grief. And it's just awesome. It's just awesome. They have together written a book called When Grief Comes Home, a gentle guide for living through loss while supporting your child. I mean, if this doesn't squarely hit so many of us and the questions that we have and the journey that we're traversing and the struggles that we face, how do you support yourself? How do you create space where you can heal while supporting your children in the middle of grief and loss? And so that's why this conversation is so practical, so poignant, so timely. I'm excited for you to hear from Erin and Colleen. Before we dive into it, I do want to invite you, if you're new to Nothing is Wasted Ministries, or if you've been around some time but you've not joined me on the call that I lead just about every month called 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story. It is kind of webinar style, except for the fact that it's a live Zoom call. So that means that you can have your camera on, we talk, interact with each other. I do about 45 minutes of teaching where I walk you through what I believe are the 5 steps that everybody has to go through, or really the 5 questions everyone has to answer in the middle of their pain and trauma, their sorrow and their suffering. And ultimately, you've got to go through these to take back your story. And nobody is immune to these. Nobody can side skirt these. And so if you're looking to kind of see the pathway laid out in front of you, I want to invite you on that call, 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. You can go to nothingiswasted.com/start here. Again, nothingiswasted.com/start here if you want to register for the next one of those. We also will have a link in the show notes and right underneath this YouTube video for you to easily access that and register for that. I would love to invite you to be a part of that. We spend the last 30 minutes or so just doing Q&A where I get an opportunity to hear from you, serve you, just in real time, be able to just, sometimes it turns into prayer and ministry. Sometimes it turns into coaching. Sometimes it just turns into, counsel and advice, whatever it is that you need. I want to be there to be able to support you in that. So nothingiswasted.com/start here, register for the next one of those. And the other thing I want to say before we dive into this conversation is, if you've been around Nothing is Wasted podcast for some time, you've noticed some shifts and some changes. We have joined up with an incredible organization and podcast network that really is helping us to be able to broaden the message of Nothing is Wasted. They came to us, they said, this is just amazing work that you guys are doing, and we want to help to get the word out there. And we also want to help you guys as you're creating sustainable models. We've been doing the podcast since 2017. So for 8 years, we've been investing into this podcast. And really, financially speaking, it's because of the generous donations of many listeners like you. It's also because of the resources that we have available, that people purchase, that we've been able to continue to pour into this podcast, expand it, grow it. And we're taking kind of the next step in that. And so what you're going to hear is you're going to hear some spots intermittently throughout this conversation from companies, organizations, services that believe in healing and that have decided to partner with us in helping make that sustainable for us. And so it is a financial model for us that has been really helpful, just to be in full transparency, just kind of want to be full disclosure in this. But I will say this. These sponsor spots that you're going to hear, we don't get financial credit for them unless you listen all the way through. So I want to encourage you. It's like 20 or 30 seconds. I just want to encourage you. If this ministry, this podcast has blessed you, one of the ways that you can give back to us passively is just by letting it play through when those sponsor spots hit, even if it's something that you're not interested in. And that's totally fine. Some people are going to be interested in some of the things that our sponsors are putting forward, and some people are not. And so just take that moment, because these conversations are really heavy and can tend to be, just really weighing. Just take that moment to take a breath. And it's only about 20 or 30 seconds. We would really appreciate if you would do that. Okay, we're going to dive into my conversation with Erin and Colleen. However, before we do that, let's go ahead and take just a quick moment to pause, and we're going to hear from one of the sponsors who are making this episode possible today. Erin, Colleen, it is so great to have you guys on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us today, Davey.
Yeah, thank you, Davey.
This is going to be such a sweet time, and it's going to be a heavy time too. I just want to, Erin, when I was reading more of your story, and I just felt the impact of it, and I felt ironically, honestly, what a lot of people say when they read my story. It's like, whoa, that's really heavy. But, as I read yours, and I know we can't compare pain, there's just this like, wow, to know that you've experienced what you've experienced, and to know that you're still standing here and talking about the goodness of God. I'm just so proud of you and so amazed at how good the Lord is. So I'm excited for our community to hear a little bit more from you guys. Would you guys each, Erin, maybe you start, and then Colleen, would you just each tell us a little bit about who you are right now, what you do, and then we're going to go back and we're going to just carry people through the story.
Yeah, I'll start with that. And my name is Erin. I live in the Central Valley of California. I'm married to my husband, Brian, and we have 3 living children, and we live next to our grandchildren. So grateful for that. I've been the executive director and founder of a grief center called Jessica's House since 2012. And this work is really coming alongside children, teens, and young adults who've experienced the death of a parent or a sibling. And then we also support their caregivers, the parents. And so this work has been really born out of my own story that I know we'll talk about, but I'm so grateful to be here. And the work is just so meaningful for me. And I'm so grateful to do it.
It's amazing.
And
Colleen?
and my name's Colleen, and I am also in the Central Valley, kind of born and raised, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and started my practice just working with all kinds of individuals and families. And then I really found a deep love to come alongside those who were holding a loss. And I kept for a few years really being drawn to Jessica's House. I had been introduced to it through Erin at a staff meeting, and I just really kind of kept feeling like I was hearing like Jessica's House, like in the background. And so when the time was right, I became a volunteer here and just felt at home and loved the work I was getting to do, and I just thought, man, if I could work here someday, that would be an absolute dream. And then it became a reality. And so I've been here on staff for about 3 years now, and just so grateful I get invited into these spaces alongside the parents are who I mostly work with now. And just, it's really an honor that I don't take lightly.
Wow. Well, Erin, you alluded to it, the work that you do with Jessica's House, that what you've started, it's very deeply personal. We talk often here about this idea of going from pain to purpose, that pain often fuels this renewed sense of purpose in us as we walk through the valley, that our passion really, passion, the root word of that is suffering. And that it usually is derived from something that we have suffered from and something we're willing to suffer for. And so that's definitely true of you. Can you just take us back and walk us through a little bit of the just horrible tragedies that you've experienced that really led to this?
Yeah, thank you, Davey. And so when my children were young, my husband, Tyler, he was on a trip. He was in Alaska with his friends, and they were on a trip to go fishing. And so he and his friends were there, and I'll never forget just having a conversation with him. And he was telling me just about the beauty of Alaska and how much he loved it and what a great time they were having, and how he couldn't wait to bring me up there the next year. And I had taken the kids to go visit his parents who lived in Monterey, just the coastal area of California. And we were there together, and I received just a 3 a.m. phone call from his brother telling me that his plane had collided with another plane and that there were no survivors. And, that was the very first time that I had really experienced a loss. And I remember like getting out of bed and just, the phone was ringing, and I had my daughter, who was 5 at the time, by my side, and hearing his brother telling me the news. And it just didn't feel real. You can't even believe that it happened. And so as I packed the kids and, we got in the car, and I remember just kind of stuffing my 3-year-old into his car seat and drove home to the Central Valley. And, in Monterey, there's this beautiful farmland that just has this rich soil. And I remember, the sun was rising and people were just driving to work. And I thought, like, how?
Yeah.
How are these people just driving to work when our whole world has changed. And it was the first time experiencing those feelings that you have with a death, where all of a sudden this world that you've always lived in feels so different and you
Yeah.
see it so differently. And so as I got home and talked to my children about what had happened, and I was really grateful that I had a lot of support from my church family. And as time went on, just after that, when you're talking about pain to purpose, there was something about even the verse about how God comforts us and all of
Mm.
our sorrows, so that we can comfort others. And I didn't ever really even notice that verse before,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
became something so important to me. And I guess just I started to kind of have that desire to comfort others someday. And I knew I
Mm.
had to heal, and we were healing. And then a few months after Tyler died, my mom, who lived with bipolar, she just suffered a severe depressive episode, and she took her own life and died of suicide. And
Wow.
it really deepened my fragility.
Yeah.
And I was already pretty fragile, with the death of Tyler. And then my sister at the time was 15, so she was a lot younger than me, and
Mm.
I needed to bring her into our home. And I think it was really just the first time that I ever saw just the loss of a mom, from a 15-year-old, and how important that is, that relationship. And I like to think about my mom, and sometimes we remember how somebody died, but just remembering how she lived, because
Yeah.
she was a really compassionate, wonderful mom, and my sister's connection to her was so strong. And so bringing her into our home, and even for my children not having their dad, it was just this time in our life where we just came together to heal. And I'm so grateful that we were surrounded by a very strong community. But I think just learning, what do children need and what do
Mm.
teens need when they've experienced such a profound loss in their life of
Yeah.
a parent. And so that's where I began doing ministry in our church for other families that were going through loss, and then over time learned about the model of the Dougie Center in Portland,
Mm.
Oregon, who they were the very first grief center, and started planning to open Jessica's house.
Wow. Phew. Man, it's pretty remarkable that not too long after you lost your husband, you're already
Mm-hmm.
not just sensing God's presence, but sensing his calling in it too.
Yeah, I did feel that way. I have a moment that I'll never forget, and that is kind of standing in my kitchen and listening to a woman tell her story. It was on the radio,
Mm.
and as I was listening to her, her husband had died in a midair collision, and I was listening to Focus on the Family, and she had written a book, and it was the very first time I felt less alone. And I remember that she was speaking the thoughts I had. And
Mm.
I thought, oh, it was the first time I was like, I just felt this deep sense of relief that somebody, not that I would ever want anybody to go through anything like that,
Right.
but because she had gone before me and she was speaking about what it felt like to have that type of loss and the uniqueness of it. And so I just remember I was really so fresh in my grief that I would carry paper towels around.
Yeah.
And I remember that I grabbed the paper towels from my kitchen because I really hadn't gone out very much, and drove to the bookstore and purchased her book. And it meant so much to me. And I think that was just this, even though at the time it was healing my heart, there was a little part of me that just said, I hope someday I can just sit next to someone, sit across from someone, and hear their story.
Mm. Phew. Yeah. There's something special about hearing someone else's story. And I don't know, I can't pinpoint quite what it is. It's probably a lot of
Mhm.
different things. Revelation tells us that they overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. But I think there's something about hearing someone's testimony to say, hey, you're not always going to feel this way. I've been where you are right now. And when we are not able to have faith or see, right, which is interesting because faith is actually really putting your stake in trusting when you can't see. But when we don't feel like we have that faith, we can borrow it from other people.
Yes.
And there's something so just mysterious and encouraging to hear someone tell their story about how God showed up for them. It almost opens our eyes up to see how is God going to show up for me? It makes us ready for that.
It does. It makes us ready for that. And that just sparks a little bit of hope. There's like something that's possible all of a sudden that feels like, oh, maybe I can do this. And here they are breathing and thriving. And you don't know in that moment, you're wondering, what does the future look like? Will I be able to do this? Can I walk day by day?
Yeah.
Will my children be okay? And so hearing someone else's story, I love what you're saying about borrowing hope. And I think it's something that we see so much at Jessica's house as people share their stories and take really good care of each other in that. And it does just bring something, a strength that is not, and we're not able to find that type of strength other places many times.
Right. So you walked through this devastating loss of your and tragic and sudden loss of your husband, loss of your mom.
Yeah.
And also the loss of a child.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I was with Jessica's house. It was for about 10 years. And,
Okay, hold on. Well,
yeah.
So you had already started Jessica's house then. So for 10 years, you were helping people as they're sorting through this and specifically helping kids because you saw that it was your kids were having trouble with it. You're going, okay, man, I want to help my kids have not just my kids, but other people's kids who are having trouble with this as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And then,
Yeah.
okay, so go ahead and go back to what happened and we'll dive into a little bit of some of that. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but I didn't realize it was 10 years that you had already been doing this. Okay.
And, it was just such an honor to do that work and to, and I don't know, Davey, I wonder if there was a part of me that just thought, okay, I'll just start helping people and maybe I won't have something else bad happen. I don't know. I think there was something in there that I just, the people that call us every day, the people that walk through the door, especially the loss of a child, I just really always hoped that would never touch our family. And so I got another late night phone call, and it was from a police officer who was actually a friend of our family who said that Carter had been in a really bad accident, that he was alive, and that he would meet us at the hospital. And so Carter was 20 years old, and it just, Carter. I think, he was the first baby. I had two other kids after I remarried to my husband, Brian, and Carter was our first child together. And I just have to say, like, he was such a joy to us. And I think it was after such a long season of loss.
Right.
And so his little life and just as he grew up, there was just something about him that he was a bright light, and he loved music. He loved leading worship at our church, and he loved cars, and he was just so fun. And so, just getting that phone call, it just didn't seem possible. And I remember driving to the hospital and, just you just can't believe it. Like, you just can't believe it's possible to go to even have that phone call and meeting the officer. And we had just dropped our daughter off at college, just actually the day before. And so we were able to fly her up, and, it did seem like in the beginning that he might make it. And, but his injuries were really severe. So we gathered around him, and as the doctors let us know that he probably it wasn't survivable. And so we were there with him. And he died in September of 2019.
Erin, I just can't, first of all, the statement that you made about, okay, I don't know if I thought that because I was doing this work to help other people that somehow that would stave off some other kind of tragedy or I'd become impervious to it. I think that's a commonly held belief,
Yeah.
because on one hand, you couldn't believe when you got this phone call about your husband and you're going
Right.
that, tragedy in general just has this nature of going, it's going to happen to somebody else. It's not going to happen to me. And then it does
Exactly.
happen to you and you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm enduring the unendurable right now. And then you come through it and you go, oh, okay, God, I see how you're doing something in this. Maybe that was, and you kind of almost wrap it up in a bow. Okay, maybe, all right, so the work we're going to do for the rest of our life now is to work in redemption of this thing that happened. But now again, we've got this force field around us, this shield. And then you get this phone call.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine what you were experiencing. What was the dialogue like then with the Lord? What was your how did you feel? Because if I were you, right, I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, God, hold on. Like, we already wrestled through this the first time. And then now, wait, I would start to think, when is the next shoe going to drop? What were you wrestling with right there through all of that?
Yeah, Davey, it was an interesting process. I think partly because I had been helping children in grief and I had gone through a lot of trauma training and a lot of training on just a lot of best practice studies on how to support someone who's grieving and how to grieve really, and what do we know about grief and how do people really heal from grief.
Yeah.
And so something that I really understood for myself is how important it was to be with the grief process and to trust the grief process. God has designed us to grieve. We can trust the emotions that come up, that they won't last forever, but as we're with them and as we're with whatever we are experiencing, to be with it. I don't think I really knew that when I was grieving the loss of Tyler and my mom. I think I was a little bit afraid to go there, and I may have skipped a few steps, and so I really let myself grieve. And I think some of the practices that we know help, even in trauma, I remember my breathing on the way to the hospital, how I was so aware of my nervous system, and I know my body as a resource that God designed, that I can lean in on some of those practices that can really help us through very traumatic times.
Yeah.
And so it was a different process in that. And so as I was sitting and as I was waiting and as I was saying goodbye and as we went through, I learned to befriend a very raw process of grief. And in that, I think the intimacy with God, I have a background of, I was raised actually with my family didn't have a faith. And I was really kind of taught that God, there wasn't a God, and but I had adopted a faith as a child that was unique. I just felt his love in my life, and I really depended on him, and I just trusted him in some ways. I can't describe that, but I just felt his love in my life, even as a child and as I went through my losses. And I felt his love in my life, but then I had to just be super honest. And so there was a rawness in my grief after Carter, and I let myself go there just to say these children that we prayed for, like I prayed for Carter's safety before he was born, and I trusted you with his life. And I think the word that comes to me, Davey, is just the word no. And there's a part of grief that we talk about that is protest. And it's very honest. And we almost can't even get through our grief process without saying that, because it's a natural process that we even have, even a child developmentally. What's their first word? Right? It's no.
Yeah.
And then their second word is mine.
Yeah. Wow.
No and mine. Right?
Wow.
And so when we think about those two words, that is what we're saying in grief. No. And they were mine. And we have to be with that protest. I gave myself to that. and allowed myself to say no to God. And I had to say, like, he was mine. Like, of course, God gave him to me and I prayed for him. But like, I got to hold him. I got to touch his skin. He was in my physical life and I enjoyed him and I wanted him in my life. And so that God allowed that, I had to just really be in my protest.
Yeah.
And there was something so intimate. And I remember one morning when I texted a friend who had lost a child and I said to her, I feel like I'm falling into the darkness. And she texted right back and said, the darkness will hold you.
Mm.
And what I realized was that as I would fall into that darkness, that was love. There was something inside of the darkness that was love, and the love would hold me there as long as it took for me. And one morning I was just saying, God, like we've just been friends for so long, I mean,
Yeah.
you've been there with me and we've talked about everything and I've trusted you for the littlest, tiniest things in my life. But what happened, and I felt him just say, Erin, your faith comes from me. It always
Mm.
has. Like, it's
Oh,
okay
wow.
if you don't have this in this moment because it's always been from me. And so just like, I'm right here, And so I'll restore the faith in me because it always has come from me.
Yeah.
And so to allow that process to be, and it was just a beautiful rebuilding. And it's weird to say that it's beautiful and that there's beauty in it, but as God expands our souls, I think there is more beauty and more
Yeah.
love. And so that was really the process.
Wow. It's truly remarkable. I mean, some of those things, I'm in grief conversations a lot. We talk about it a lot, just the nature of what we do. But man, I've never heard it put that way in terms of, especially the no mine, because I remember being in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I remember going, no,
Yeah.
mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, it's interesting because sometimes we can think that right there, we could look at that, especially if you haven't walked through grief and you're, prior to me walking through pain, I was very unempathetic toward people who were walking through pain. And so I was looking at it from more of a standpoint of like, hey, I need to help you to walk through your sanctification process. I was a pastor, right? So I need to help you to recognize that is not a godly thought. That's what my presupposition would have
Oh,
been.
yeah.
That's what would have been my approach. And then when I experienced that same thing, the whole no mine, I didn't hear this rebuke from God.
No.
I didn't hear this like, that's sin. That's a sinful thought. You need to repent from that. I heard this, just what you were describing. It was like this father that was just wrapping his arms around me and reminding me of who he is, reminding me of who I am, lovingly reminding me that none of this is mine.
Yeah.
And that darkness felt like love to me too. What a beautiful way that you put that, Erin. That's just, oh man. So as you're wrestling through all of this, and I think it's a beautiful thing that God even gave you on some level, some equipping, some tools, some education, some awareness prior to it, because you've been doing this trauma work to help other people. Did this further fuel that as you're walking through this valley, as you're wrestling through? Did it further fuel it? Is it something that caused a lot of discouragement? Did it cause some stutter steps for a little while? Describe to me that process as you're starting to come to terms with it again, as you're making peace with this with God. All the while you're helping other people, you're still running this organization. What did that do in your soul in terms of fueling that or stifling it?
I think just deepening that process and that rawness, I felt an invitation to begin just writing and being honest, just kind of in a blog online and just sharing kind of what was in my heart about the grief process. And I think people writing me back and saying, oh, that really captured it for me too. And just like that Me Too moment that I had standing in my kitchen listening to that mom who had lost her husband, I think it definitely fueled it. I think each time we go through a loss, I don't know, it's like a key or something where we can have a key to each other's hearts in some ways. Like I didn't ever know all the families that have walked through our doors that have experienced the death of their child. I didn't have a key to their heart.
Right.
I mean, I think even
Wow.
last night I sat with the mom and I just stood with the mom and we just had an exchange. And there's something about she had also lost a child and we can just be together in this moment of understanding.
Mm.
And, I think it deepened that for me. And like you said before, just the word, compassion with suffering, it's that idea. And it just continues to, as we've kind of gone on to write this book. And I think it really has furthered kind of this ministry
Yeah.
in a new way,
Yeah. Phew, man. Yeah. This whole, what you're pinpointing on is that really at the bottom of your grief, or what would seem like the bottom of your grief, the place that Jesus would seem like he is the furthest away from us, this is actually in that wrestling is where we find him the most.
So true. Yeah. Yeah. We touch something if we really allow ourselves to go there.
Yeah.
And I think our mental health is really dependent on aligning with our suffering.
Mm. Wow. Talk more about that. What do you mean by that? Because that's
Yeah.
very rich underneath all of that. Your mental health is aligning with your suffering.
Yeah. I think that when we look at mental health, it really has so much to do with not avoiding our suffering, right? And so some of the ways, I mean, as we're with it and as we allow ourselves to go into it, I think I found for myself in grief, the more I aligned, the less anxious I was. The more truth I had to be honest, right? It was the very first time that I aligned with my suffering. I didn't try to bright side myself or, feel like, I got to just be. And I think that really helped me to heal in new ways that I don't think I would have discovered had I not known the importance of being in the darkness.
Mm. Mm. That is such a profound concept, Erin. And also, I think why it's so profound, it's so simple. Think about all of that. I mean, we talk mental health is a massive conversation right now in vogue. I'm grateful for that. I mean, 10 years ago when I walked through the loss of my wife, when you walked through the loss of your husband, this was not a conversation being had. I mean, even in Christian circles and Christian publishing, there was not a lot of stuff about grief. There was not a lot of stuff about trauma. There's certainly, and there wasn't a lot of stuff about mental health. It's now come as a major surgence, I guess you could say. It's not been a resurgence. It's really just surged here. But to put it that simply and say this mental health really comes down to aligning ourselves with our suffering. And the more we try to cope, the more we try to form these hedges around not suffering, the more we're going to be misaligned. And so the more we're going to be fractured in our mental health.
Yeah. And I think that was true for me in my own grief. For my mental health, I needed to align with my suffering. And I think, obviously mental health is so complex. And,
Right.
I think about someone like my mom and, all the
Right.
team that she needed around her. But for me and my mental health, there was so much suffering that I didn't allow myself to do with my early losses.
Yeah.
And I think for me, my mental health was just aligning with my suffering was just what I needed to really integrate and to allow that restoration and healing process.
Yeah. Whew, that's so good. Yeah, because you're right. You're right. There's a lot of complexity within that. But maybe if we think about it from a clinical standpoint, say, okay, first line modalities. Let's start here. And is there anything that you're trying to avoid in terms of your suffering? Are you trying to stuff it? Are you trying to cope with it? Are you forming maladaptive coping mechanisms? Because that's going to cause a further misalignment. It's going to cause a further fractioning in your heart and your mind. Wow, so good. So you're doing this work yourself, you're also helping your kids, which is
Mhm.
additionally challenging. I mean, one of the biggest questions that we get and where people are leaning in a lot right now is going, okay, how do I help my kids with this? Because it's on some fronts, it's very similar in nature, but also it's very different too, because they're at a
Mhm.
different developmental stage. They're going to metabolize this way differently, not
Mhm.
just between all of them, but also differently than you because they're just at a different maturity stage. What are some things that you found? Maybe we'll frame it up this way. What are some things you found as you were helping your kids walk through this that began to become these like transferable principles that you've taken into this practice with Jessica's house?
Mm. Yeah, I think one thing I really noticed about my kids during that time was how much they needed my presence and how their world felt less safe,
Mm,
just having this big disruption. And so that is, I think, something that I learned is something else I learned is they had their own ideas about what happened. And so
mm,
being able to just talk openly about what happened. I remember talking to my son and even telling him about the death and how his daddy had died in this accident. And we were in the backyard sandbox when that happened.
mm.
And he really had just so many questions about, like, well, what happened? And, he was just kind of playing out the experience and what he kind of visualized in the sandbox at that time.
Mm.
And some of those, that little piece that he did, we do every day at Jessica's house, where
Wow.
kids create scenes in the sand and bring, figures that they can really tell their story in ways that aren't verbal. And so he was teaching me something way back then about what he needed.
Mm.
And so learning to, I think the truth for kids, I think, especially with my mom's death, being suicide, I think it's really hard for
Yeah.
parents to be honest, since death is a public record and so
Yeah.
many people know how people died. And I think it's kind of our first question, right? Like if we hear,
Yeah.
like maybe there's a
How
headline
did
that
it
says,
happen?
how
Yeah.
did it happen? Right? How did they
Mm.
die? People want to know, and kids want to know too. And so, whatever we can do to tell the truth about
Mm.
what happened, to be there for their questions, to developmentally talk to them honestly, and to become that trusted person that they know that for the rest of their life they can go to you as a parent to tell them the truth. And
Mm.
so we are really, that was something that I really learned, that my kids wanted the truth and they needed my presence.
Wow. That's really good because I don't think that would be intuitive for a lot of people.
Mm,
I think that I even think about my wife now, Christy, and I think
mhm,
she intuitively would be like, hey, we just need to talk to our kids about what happened and do it in an age appropriate way. And then
mhm,
let that, so that would be intuition for her. For me, it'd be like, oh, I don't know if, because of the nature of how my late wife died. And that's, man, we should
mhm,
probably protect them or shield them from that. But then that becomes
mhm,
really complicated because, like you
mhm,
said, it's very public. They're going to find out. And what happens
mhm,
if they're finding out from somebody else and they're not finding
mhm,
out from me? And how do I go and do recon after that? Like that's, so, and Colleen, I'd like to bring you in on this part too, because maybe help us to understand, because you said something right there that was really pivotal, that they're telling you what they need as they're fleshing some of this out. So what I heard you describe was a very similar, like it's like a play therapy kind of model right there that you saw in the sandbox. He's kind of playing out some of his emotions or his reality right there. Can maybe help us understand how to recognize that stuff as parents. Like, how do we intuit in those moments and go, oh, that what's happening there, he's telling me something or she's telling me something. And how do we have the wherewithal or the to be cognizant of knowing what they need, how to walk them through that, you know, instead of just kind of, I don't want to I don't want to make this sound bad, but like, I think what you guys do, there's a huge need and a space to be able to bring someone to a professional. But I also want to make sure that, I know you guys want to make sure that parents are equipped to do this on some level themselves as they're guiding them through. We work with a lot of people who have lost and they're guiding kids, and they, especially widowers, they're going, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to farm it out totally. And we're trying to help them like, hey, the best stuff you can do is right there every single day at the breakfast table. So help us to understand how to start to practice that. How do we start to be mindful of those things and recognize what our kids are showing us?
Yeah, I think, it's just so important for us not to shy away from those hard conversations. I really feel that with you, Davey, of what you said of just wanting to shield them from pain, but then knowing you probably do need to talk to them about it though. They need to hear that from you.
Yeah.
And so letting them be the guide, just sharing with them the news, at a level they can digest it, and then let their questions be your guide for what they're ready to hear more of. They're going to ask questions they're ready for answers to. And so often parents are worried that the kids will ask all the hardest questions, but it's not usually the case yet. They may come in time, but that's what tends to happen is those questions come back over time as kids, kind of chew over that information and new questions come out of it. When they're ready to learn more, they come back with, further follow-up questions. So knowing that this won't be the first and only conversation you ever have. It is the first of many, but that your kid is going to teach you what they're ready to know. And in terms of, how to recognize, where they are in the moment, whether it's through play or whatnot, but, that is how kids explore their world, is through play.
Yeah.
And so, what can sometimes look like, oh, they're just playing, it really can be them doing their work. It can be them processing. We have a story from Jessica's house of a little boy. He was 3 when his mom died, and he stopped talking after she died. And so he started coming to Jessica's house, and every other week he would come to his group and he never said a word, which is okay. But he would always go to our little kitchen and he'd make spaghetti and ice cream every single week, like clockwork. Just super cute, right? And about 4 months after being in our program, he had begun talking again. And so he shared with his facilitator that his mommy used to make him spaghetti, and if he ate it all, she would give him ice cream. And so that whole time he was with us, it just looked like he was playing, but that was him working it out.
Yeah.
And his play will evolve in time. It will deepen as he grows and matures as well. And that play can turn into more, thoughtfulness through writing or music or, just so many different forms of expression, somatic practices. And so that it's just going to evolve in time. And I think as a parent, knowing that, your kid is going to grow up now with this loss, and you're going to grow up with them.
Yeah. How do I, as a parent, know what kind of behavior, because a lot of this stuff kind of manifests itself in behavior, right? It's what we're seeing external, especially when they're at an age where they're not able to metabolize it verbally and able to process through that verbally. And, not saying that they're pre-verbal, but saying that they're just not able to express it in words. They're at that kind of age group. And so we're watching things come out. How do you know, oh, here's behavior to be concerned or worried about that we need to either lean in a little bit more, bring in professional help, or go see? And here's just kind of like some of the normal quote unquote behavior that would be accompanied with this that we can just kind of watch and be mindful and guide. And, how do we discern those things? Because I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that we had. Our kids now are 11, 10, and 5, and our 11 and 10-year-old were the two that went through a whole lot with our story. And so we always were wrestling with, like, is this a trauma response? Is this a normal childhood behavioral response? How do we even, and having to parse that out every single time was so exhausting. You're like, so is there anything that parents who are listening to this that they can keep in mind as they're trying to parse that out themselves?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, your child best. You knew them before the death, and you're with them now too. So you know what is quote unquote normal and what is not. And you guys are all living in your new not normal. So
Mm,
it's not going to be exactly what it used to. But at your core, you are the same person of just your kind of in terms of does your kid naturally like to verbally process a lot, or is he more naturally quiet and kind of, internal processor? And so noticing when you see big shifts, a lot of isolation and withdraw, kind of shutting out, changes in their eating habits or sleeping behaviors, and that's just true, period. Growing up is so hard. And I would say the same thing if your child hadn't experienced a death in their life. If you're noticing those big changes in them, then they need some extra support. But on that,
mm,
I'm obviously biased and a huge proponent for therapy. And I'm a big proponent for going before you think you need to, because
mhm.
I think a lot of times we just wait and
Yep.
wait and kind of put it in our little satchel of things that we'll take to therapy someday. But
Yeah.
then sometimes we wait so long, and
Right.
I just want to say the death of someone in your child's life that warrants therapy.
Yep. Yep.
That's a change that they're going to live with forever. And you for yourself too, you're a parent, which is the hardest job ever
Right.
for me, I've learned. And also, you're grieving the loss of your person and you're supporting your child through that too. And
Right.
those questions, I hear that all the time in our group, with their adolescent kids. They're like, I don't know if this is hormones or if this is
Right.
grief. I can't
Right.
I can't tell it apart. And so it's so common. And so why not walk alongside other people who can help you?
Yeah, it's so good.
And those are the people in your life that you trust, those that can really stabilize your family,
Yep.
family, close friends, your pastors, your church community, and then also, the mental health support too through a therapist,
Right.
and just anything you can do to have just to really like pad your whole little family with support from others
Right.
is going to just be a really good start. And they can
Yeah.
kind of also help you see things that you may not be able to see yourself because you are grieving too.
Yep. Yep. So good. Yeah, I wish that early on I had taken that kind of approach with my son specifically. Like I went through therapy. I went through all of that kind of stuff, but I had this idea that he was 15 months old.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know what happened. Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned since then quite the opposite.
Mm.
You know, everything from the body keeps the score to everything else that we've researched and studied and experienced. I help a friend with leading a widower retreat twice a year. He has a widower ministry, and we're constantly telling these widowers, hey, right now, like, go ahead. Even if you don't see signs of it,
Yeah.
have them walk with a therapist, whatever it may be. And I love the fact that you guys have mentioned several different methodologies, that there's not just one, it's not just play therapy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'd love for you guys each to speak to this idea of the somatic stuff that you were talking about, because I've only recently, in the past year and a half, learned of some of this, and it's been dramatically helpful for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that. A lot of people may not know what that is. What do you mean when you reference somatic therapy, and what does that look like? How do we facilitate that? Because there's ways you can facilitate that at home, and there's ways that you need a professional to help facilitate that.
Yeah, throughout our book, Davey, we talk a lot about somatic, which just means the body. And what we know about grief and trauma is we have these reactions after we experience something, and it really is like it's energy in our body, right?
Mhm.
And it really needs to be expressed in some way. And so, what we're kind of talking about is that as we feel it in our body, then we will find ways to express it. And so it needs to come out in
Mm.
some form. And I think everyone's different, right? And so what
Right.
we see at Jessica's house is some people are saying that, you know what, like just soccer is like
Mhm.
their way. Like they really need to just go out and they need to kick a ball. So interesting, but what we know is that you cannot worry and catch a ball at the same time.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when kids learn that there are natural ways just in their everyday life that they can kind of pause their worries for a moment
Hmm.
to bring concentration to an activity. So some of that can really help. It's just that energy in your body going outside, music. And,
Hmm.
I had a group of middles, like junior high girls for 2 years. They loved writing poetry.
Mm.
And so that energy that was in their body, they had all experienced the death of their mom. They loved to write poetry, but something else that they did is we would deepen it and they would create rhythm out of their poetry and
Hmm.
they would just come together in a circle. I remember one day it was just so simple. They were talking about their mom's favorite ice cream. No one had ever asked them, "Hey, what was your mom's favorite ice cream?" And they wanted to talk about that. And so they came in a circle and they started creating rhythm out of like Rocky Road and lemon sorbet, and they got it out of their body. But there's that deep resonance that can happen when you feel understood because
Yeah.
someone's leaning in and saying, "Hey, what was your mom's favorite ice cream?"
Mm.
And then they can release that into the world with other people. It's such a powerful experience. So at Jessica's house, we're using rhythm, we're using art, we're using bilateral movement, which helps us process trauma because we're using both, the bilateral, both sides of our brain, both sides of our body. And so we're talking about that integration. Like, what does it feel like to paint with two hands, having a paintbrush in each hand? And we have a place in our slow movement room where they can just be with a big mirror. They can draw with both parts of their body. And
Yeah.
so we're talking about just integration and finding what is it that really helps me. We kind of think of it, and we talk a lot in the book about it being like weather in your body. And
Mm.
if you kind of imagine like
It's a
there's a
great
weather
picture.
vane,
Yeah.
it's like a weather vane on top of your head or something, and it's pointing you to a resource. So, whatever that expression is, that you can point it in the direction of finding a way to express it and then finding else, what else do you need to feel better in your body? And so sometimes it's just
It's
like,
great.
talking to a friend or, just finding some safety, we love weighted blankets here. And sometimes if you're really anxious, maybe you just, you know, get something really cold and put it on your neck. And, there
Yeah.
are just all kinds of ways that we can help really work with our nervous system
Yeah.
to find what it needs to find a way for expression and coming back to where we feel our best.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah. We were going through some of that journey with my son specifically, and we had learned some of these practices and learned somatic modes of therapy. They were basically like, hey, you need to like have him run cross country
Mm-hmm.
or, but they specifically referred to this bilateral movement, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
so fascinating because and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that it essentially simulates a similar kind of thing that EMDR simulates
Mm-hmm.
with that right, left, and it starts to engage both parts of
Mm-hmm.
the brain, and there's a rhythmic nature to it.
Yeah.
And so it begins to help to rewrite some of those neural pathways, even
Mm-hmm.
just by moving your body in a particular way. So Christy, my wife, she ran cross country in college. So she goes out to Weston's first cross country practice and she runs with him. And in the middle of this, he just starts weeping,
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely. And Christy thought at first it was because it was too hard. She's like, is this too? And she goes, are you okay? Do you need to stop? He goes, I don't know why I'm crying. I have no idea why, but his body was releasing all of this stored trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just as simple as
Mm-hmm.
his first cross country practice,
Yeah.
and just running with that right, left, and was able to start processing some of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff and getting some of that stuff out.
It's so important because think about even, after we go through a trauma, how our body will shake.
Yes.
And how important that is, just that movement and just how our nervous system can really help us.
Yeah.
And so just allowing that and recreating that in some ways, sometimes
Yep.
through pounding the pavement with our feet or whatever it is, shaking our body. And so a lot of that can just be so helpful. And also,
Yeah.
to come to a place of like really having that type of release is really powerful.
Mm.
And, it doesn't always have to come in the form of like running, cross country
Right.
too, because for some people they'd be like, well, I'm out.
Oh
But
yeah, there were a
walk
lot of
around
different
walk around
options
the
that they gave
block,
us. Yes, exactly.
speaking for
Yep.
myself probably.
Yep. Well,
But
then
a
they also
walk
said
around
the
the
thing about
block,
the music, right?
the
There was like,
music.
hey, teach them how to play music, especially with a metronome. That like
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
piano's
Yep.
really good for the right left, drums, it's all for So yeah,
Yes.
you're right. To your point, Colleen, absolutely.
And even just swaying side to side, that's just a
Yeah.
natural, that's actually our nervous system re-regulating ourselves.
Mm,
If we don't even notice we're doing it, since I've learned that, I can catch myself now and I'm like, oh, there you are. And just
mm,
noticing it, welcoming it, and just kind of doing that sway, squeezing your hands alternatingly, whether you're driving or your kids at school and they can just do that at their desk and nobody will
yeah.
notice. Such simple little kind of um, non-obvious ways too that we can help
Yeah.
ourselves. Erin's
Mm,
go-to, I'll share for you right now, is humming, and just such a
mm.
simple practice, and whistling.
Mm.
You know how it's a lovely sound when your kid whistles for like 4 minutes nonstop. And I used to be like, all right, we're done, but I can't now. I gotta let him keep
It's like,
whistling because I'm like, it's
this is
helping him.
therapy.
I gotta let it go. But just those simple little things that we just naturally do
Yeah.
just goes back to show like our body really knows what it needs.
Yeah.
And so just leaning into what works for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love the fact that, like, as we're learning more about this, it's continuing to confirm to us we are integrated beings. God created us as whole beings, mind, body, spirit. We are not compartmentalized.
No.
Every part of us impacts the other, which I come from church world, right? And so this is I feel like my biggest agenda and calling is to help the church embrace this. So this is not just the biblical and the clinical, that God has brought both of them together and converged for us to understand, okay, here's how we walk in wholeness.
Yes, yes. And knowing our body is a resource, when you can lean on that and know that God has created your body to take care of you, it's so powerful.
Yeah. So good. Well, you guys have alluded to the book. We haven't actually made mention of it yet, but you guys wrote a book together called When Grief Comes Home, a gentle guide for living through loss while supporting your child. This is there are so many questions that we get about this because people feel at a loss for this, especially when they don't feel like they have the capacity in the middle of their own grief. They barely feel like they're hanging on by a thread to be able to support themselves. And so what often happens is either one ditch they fall into is they don't support themselves in an effort to support those around them, right? Or they just become completely detached and only support themselves, and then their kids feel this neglect. What would you say? Of course, you guys offer so much in the book about this, but what would you say would be some helpful guides for those who are going, how do I find the capacity, carve the capacity to be able to do both, to support myself and my kids in the middle of the season?
You just can't pour from an empty cup. And so I just think we have to give ourselves that permission as parents that we really do have to tend to our needs first and really just take it moment by moment. You don't need to worry about next week right now or even tomorrow. Like, just how are you right now? Especially for those that are really in the early days of grief. Just take care of yourself in this moment, and then you'll be able to have that more of a capacity to be with your kid. And I think some of the things that we introduce into the book are nice because you could do it alongside your kid, and so anything that you can find that you and they can do together at the same time, first of all, it's connection, which
Yeah.
is what your kid needs, and they need
Right.
your presence. And then it's healing practices for both of you. So again, going for a walk together, shooting hoops together, sitting and doing some of the expressive art invitations we included, getting clay out, molding that, pounding that, kneading that. There are a lot of things you could do with your child to maybe take off the pressure of, and I think that's another thing, is just to try to release yourself from some of the pressure. You've never walked in this land. It's really uncharted territory. And so you're going to learn by doing, day by day. And I hope you don't do it alone. I hope you surround yourself with others who can help do these things with you.
That's good. Yeah, you guys talk often and really bring forward a lot this idea of community in the book and how it's imperative to have community to support you. Can you just dive into that just a little bit as well too? You alluded to it earlier that you've got to hedge yourself and kind of hem yourself with this community. Some people find themselves in the middle of these seasons. They realize they wake up and realize that I haven't done that preemptively. I don't have people, that can be a support. So if that's the case, how do we begin to build that? If we do have it, how do we lean into it? Why is it so important?
Yeah. Just having someone else around you and holding this heavy loss together is really the way we get through it. We can't do it alone. And anything that we can do to bring others around us and to have a really good home team. And Colleen said earlier, of course, it's your pastors, it's the counselors, it's good friends. And who is it that really gives you life and gives you energy? I think really thinking about your energy when you're grieving is important
Yeah.
because there are some people that may not be when you are in a very tender space and in grief. Maybe they're your really fun friend that you're going to get back to someday, and they don't quite understand the tenderness and gentleness that you might need in this moment. And so finding who is it that can really hold this with you, who bring you energy and strength and surround yourself. We sometimes will talk about kind of if you think about a house, you have your people that are kind of in the bedroom with you. Those are your really close people. Those are the ones that just know everything. And maybe some people are in the kitchen and they're your people that you just say, hey, I'll just give a list of some of these things that I do every day. I make my kids their lunch and the dog has a vet appointment and these are just the everyday things that I really need help with. And so finding those people that can just kind of check your boxes and help you with tasks. And then also you may have those front porch people.
Yeah.
And those are the people that are there with you and they know, and maybe they can take your kids to practice and bring them home from practice or, just pick something up at the store for you. And maybe they're not in your just intimate space where, just where you don't feel quite as comfortable in that space. So I think whatever you can do to preserve your limited energy is very important. And it's okay to just do that and to know that this is a fragile time. And it's okay for you to preserve your energy right now and bring that home team around you that will bring you the most strength.
Wow. That's really good. Erin, one of the things I'm curious, because one of the questions we get, just to pivot the conversation a little bit, is people are wanting to know how they can begin to step into purpose work after they've gone through what they've gone through. You obviously have done this to a great extent. I mean, you've developed an entire organization around this. Not everybody's called to do that. Not everybody can do that. Not every, they don't have the capacity to, or they don't have the gift set to do that. How did you go about deciding? What did that look like for you to say, no, this is what I feel like God is really calling me to lean into. And this is what it's going to, I know you probably didn't intend for it to morph into if you're anything like me, to what it has morphed into, but can you tell me a little bit about that decision-making process for you, especially in the beginning, as you were discerning, because it could have easily been a different kind of purpose work that you stepped into, something else to exercise out this redemptive narrative in your life, but you chose this. Talk to me about why and how you went through that process.
I think, first of all, I took a lot of naps in the beginning. I really took care of myself and truly, I rested a lot and I really tried to heal as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I think just to speak to that, sometimes we can jump into advocacy really fast.
Yeah.
And sometimes
That's
it
good.
can, it will impair our best ways of healing
Yeah.
because we may not have the time to really do that deep work. And it's so tempting, right? Because when we go through something so hard, we want to help as much, as quickly as we can, but to give that loss what it deserves and just all those parts of you that need to heal, really walking through that. And then I think I just noticed in myself like what it was natural invitation. And, I started with really just we wanted to start a group in our church about how do you come alongside someone who's
Mm,
grieving. So I started there. And I think I just
that's cool.
started with what was helpful to me. I mean, hey, I had a neighbor and she was my walking partner every day before Tyler died, and she showed up at my front porch a few days after he died, and there were always cars there and people over, and she said, "Hey, I don't know what to do. I don't even know what to say, but here's some toilet paper. I thought you might need this." And it was just like the simplest thing, but it's just meeting needs. And it was just like there were some really important ways people showed up for me that mattered and really aided my healing. And so we just started with the group, and it was interesting because the response really taught me that it was needed, that people wanted to
Mm,
know. In the church, they were like, what do we do? What do we say? What do we say when we bump into someone at the grocery store? And how can we be with someone in their pain? And so we just started there, and then started a ministry. And I think just following the need. And so I think like just noticing momentum. I'm a huge believer in divine momentum.
mm,
Sometimes just how
that's
God
great.
brings energy around something, and really watching him and feeling him and letting him lead. And I feel like once that happens, I always say, like, this is like for women when we get pregnant, it's like we're like, oh man, we have to actually birth this baby. And like there's no way
Yeah,
around
it's
it,
an
right?
alternative. Here we go.
And so yeah, here we
Yep.
go. And so it's kind of like that. It's like sometimes you get like this thing that's inside of you, and you just have to put it in the world, and you just know when you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is something inside of me. I have to birth it into the world. There's really no choice. It's inside, and God brings the people, he brings the energy, and it's just it's amazing to watch the divine momentum. And I think
Yep.
about, the Bible talks about how it's the orphans and the widows, that pure religion.
Mm,
And, how close is that to God? And just watching Jesus and his responses to death, and how grief was important to him. And I I just felt like I was aligning some in his ministry somehow to come alongside. And I think whatever that is, because there are so many parts of suffering in our lives, and so many ways to join in and help others someday. And so just kind of watching for those little pieces, invitations along the way.
that's so good. I love that idea of divine momentum because I think there's a lot of times we can try to conjure up something that's not there.
Mm,
Whether it's because
mhm,
we think we're supposed to do that because
mhm,
this is just the way of how you're supposed to go,
mhm,
when something, or it's not understanding the alignment of your own giftings and your own,
mhm,
like how God built you.
mhm,
And so you see what somebody else is doing or what somebody else has, and you're like, oh, that looks alluring or desirable, and so I want to go chase after that. It's like God's like,
mhm.
no, I've got something else for you. Look
Mm.
for the divine momentum.
Look for that divine momentum, because it's not just in you, it's in other
Yeah,
people too.
that's right.
And so that's when he brings other people, and you're talking to them, and they like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about that too. And we had so many key people who also had a heart for this ministry that came together. And it's never about one person. It's all about just so many people and all different gifts and bringing something to the world. And so, yeah, I think just watching for that.
That is so good. Wow. Wow. Okay, so I usually don't ask an open-ended question like this, but I want to ask one for each of you guys as we're coming to a close. For both of you, Colleen, Erin, what are you guys most excited about for this book? I just released a book last year too, and it's like, oh, there's something specifically I'm most excited about with releasing the book. What for each of you guys would you say, okay, this is when I think about this going out to the world, this is what I'm most excited about?
I think that, not everybody has a Jessica's house in their backyard. There
Mm,
are a number of grief centers across the country, and you can look, for your listeners, if you go to nacg.org, there's a search there that you can do to see where your closest one is. But the unfortunate reality is there's just not enough.
Yeah.
And so I am really hoping that this book can reach those who really need it, who don't have another place that they can go to, or that it could just be another layer of support, among the other layers of support that they're putting on.
Yeah.
That's my hope, is that it can just be this evergreen resource that continues to come alongside readers who need it. And we just hope it stays in print for a long time, because there's a lot of people out there who unfortunately don't know that they're going to need it yet. But they will. And so just want it to be there for them.
That's great. Erin, what about you?
Yeah, what comes to mind for me is Henry Nouwen said, hospitality is when a stranger enters and becomes a friend. And I think about the word companion. It means with bread. It means bringing hospitality. And we try to do that at Jessica's house, but I want this book to be an extension of Jessica's house, hospitality to someone's pain. We don't just tell just one story in this book. We try to compile many different stories from many different people that have been in our program for all of these years. And I really hope someone feels hospitality, a companion in their pain, that they feel less alone. And those are some of the stories that we're hearing right now, is just that someone is feeling understood, and for the very first time. And I think that would be my wish and hope.
Wow. Well, it is certainly an incredible resource, this book is, and everything that you guys are doing is amazing. I wish there was a Jessica's house in every single town and every single city, because certainly now that you guys have told me about this network, especially, that's going to be something that we really utilize as a referral, because I can't tell you how many times we have people asking us, hey, do you know of a place? Do you know of a place that's trusted, right? That we can know that when we send them there, this is going to be a place where they're going to experience some kind of like similar heartbeat, ethos, and practices. And so I'm just so proud of you guys for what you're doing, both of you guys, and Erin, proud of you for how you've walked through this and not let the enemy have the last word in your story.
Thank you,
But
Davey.
you are really you're partnering with God to take back your story, and you're helping so many people do the same for their stories, and the ripple effects for what the work both of you guys are doing in these kids' lives, in these families' lives. I mean, it's going to ring out for generations to come.
Hope so.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thanks for having us. Been an
thank
honor
you
to be
guys.
with you.
Yeah, well, thank you for spending time with us. It's been such an honor to hear from you guys. So we'll put the links in the show notes and right below this YouTube, if you guys are watching it on YouTube, for all of the things they reference, especially this book. Make sure you pick it up when grief comes home, a gentle guide for living through loss while supporting your child. Jessica's House is the name of the organization. If you want to, and I didn't even ask where you guys are located. You said Monterey, California, right? Is that where Jessica's House is located?
We're in the Central Valley, so we're in Turlock, California.
Okay. So if you happen to be around there, definitely make sure that you check that out. But then, of course, the organization that the network you guys reference, we'll put that in the show notes so people can make sure that they get that very conveniently. Thank you guys again. This has just been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now, be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. Follow me at Davey Blackburn. We'd love to interact with you, so be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends.
But also, how do I see other people and what they're going through? And I think, again, it goes back to that Imago Dei principle. And when we see others as valuable with purpose and just being created in God's image, it helps us to see people the way that God sees people.
Yeah.
And so when we do see someone suffering, I know with your story, your community and the people that loved you, that surrounded you, that came and walked with you through your story, the sense of community is something that Jesus teaches.
That's right.
You know, in his healing, in his interaction with people, whether they're disabled, whether they're, caught in sin or whatever, he wanted to engage the community to help people to see one another as broken, but as created in God's image.
Yeah.
And I think the church can do better at, clarifying that and communicating that more loudly.